Thanks to CuriosityStream for sponsoring this video. I have a link for you to try out Premium for free, so hang out until the end. This is the Galaxy Note 10, and beyond being the latest and greatest flagship from Samsung with upgraded specs and some gorgeous new color options, this phone is also the clearest example of the partnership Samsung and Microsoft have built over the last few years. It's pretty uncharacteristic of me to buy a €1,000 flagship like this, especially at launch, but I'm really excited about this partnership. So in the 56th episode of the Store Behind series, let's explore the long and winding road of these two companies going from essentially being enemies to becoming each other's best friends, and then also talk about what this partnership means for you. Real quick before we start, if you'd like to see more in-depth analysis of tech companies, especially from a business perspective, then consider subscribing to TechAltar. First, a bit of history. The Samsung-Microsoft partnership, weirdly enough, starts with the patent litigations and legal disputes the old Microsoft was famous for. Because as recently as in 2013, Microsoft collected over $1 billion a year from Samsung for Android-related patents the company owned. And by the way, they reportedly also collected $5 to $13 per Android phone from almost all device makers like HTC, Sony, and LG too. Making billions a year without the need to do much work themselves seemed like a brilliant business, and yet in 2014, when Satya Nadella became the CEO of Microsoft, he decided to shift away from this strategy. Satya saw the writing on the wall. Mobile phones continued to get more and more important, and Google's strong mobile portfolio started hurting Microsoft. Gmail threatened Outlook, Google Drive threatened OneDrive, Google Docs threatened Office, and so on. And while the Microsoft products still reign supreme on desktops and in the enterprise, users were starting to shift towards the more mobile-optimized Google apps on phones. Seeing the threat clearly, the new CEO said Microsoft had to embrace a mobile-first, cloud-first approach at all costs and put together a battle plan consisting of two giant steps. First, the new Microsoft looked at all of those incoming billions in royalty payments from phone makers and said nope, they were not going to continue collecting those. Instead, they convinced almost all device makers to have Microsoft apps like OneDrive and Office pre-installed on their devices. Those phone makers, of course, happily accepted the deal, which gave Microsoft's apps unprecedented distribution on Android phone, the likes of which probably only Google has ever seen. And second, Microsoft got to work to ensure that their mobile apps would actually become good. They bought three key companies, Sunrise, Acompli, and Wunderlist. Hip, independent, talented teams making arguably some of the best calendar, email, and to-do list management apps on iOS and Android. I like to think of those three categories as kind of the holy trinity of productivity work, a perfect match for Microsoft's portfolio, and the newly acquired teams were quickly put in charge of most of Microsoft's core mobile apps. Acompli founder took over Outlook Mobile before he rose in the ranks to lead the entire Office group, and the Wunderlist team in Berlin was tasked with building Microsoft's very own To-Do app, for example. And combined, these two steps, so being pre-installed across devices around the world and also having vastly improved app quality, they really worked wonders for Microsoft. The company started rolling out app after app on these platforms, and people started taking them seriously as a mobile player. But their integrations with Samsung and other device makers were really basic at first. Not only were they not exactly voluntary, with most device makers pre-installing Microsoft apps simply to avoid hundreds of millions of dollars in royalty payments, they were also mostly just that, pre-installed bloatware without any significant optimizations or any deep integrations. But as Satya consistently pushed for the embrace of mobile platforms, as well as for Microsoft to see other companies as partners and not just enemies and competitors, I've made a whole video about that topic, it's one of my favorite topics ever, it's somewhere here, but as he pushed for those things, things eventually got better. First, of course, Microsoft's apps got better, but second, companies also started seeing Microsoft as an actual potential partner and not just as a necessary evil they had to live with. Chief among them, of course, is Samsung, who Microsoft singled out as being strategically important. Because not only did Samsung, being the largest device maker in the world, just have billions of active devices which Microsoft could target, but also because Samsung was, and still is, in need of a partner like Microsoft. For almost a decade, Samsung has been fighting to reduce its reliance on Google and has been desperately trying to avoid being seen as just yet another commodity Android phone maker. They have built their own operating system called Tizen to replace Android wherever possible, including watches and TVs, and they have used a very heavily customized version of Android wherever they can't ditch Google, like on phones, to cover up the Google stuff as much as legally possible. They really don't want to be just a dumb hardware maker for somebody else's OS. And while their sales numbers show that they've probably succeeded at this, for the most part, it's clear to see that Samsung software often just isn't the best. While I actually find their Android skin, called One UI, quite compelling, their individual services, like Bixby, Samsung Email and the like, have not been very well received by most consumers. Which is what Microsoft, whose services have been really well received by consumers on these mobile platforms lately, offered to help with, including deep integrations into Samsung's mobile operating system. So let's take a look at some of these integrations on the Galaxy Note 10. Beyond a few pre-installed Microsoft apps, most of which you can thankfully uninstall, the Note 10 comes with a few unique capabilities. For example, Outlook has some S Pen functionality, like how hovering over emails pops out these little preview windows. OneDrive lets you sign and annotate PDF documents with a pen quite nicely, which is very handy. My personal favorite, and this isn't actually specific to the Note 10, but I wanted to mention it, is just how well OneNote works with the pen. I storyboarded this entire video on the Note, which worked great, and it's quite magical how solid the syncing and the handwriting recognition is. Then there's Link to Windows, which is what the company's talked about the most. It is an app that allows you to access your phone from your PC, including seeing your photos and just being able to drag and drop them, seeing and replying to text messages, as well as your phone's notifications, which I want fewer notifications in my life, not more, but it's here. And finally, screen mirroring, which is especially fun on a touchscreen laptop. This phone linking is available on other Android phones in a more limited fashion as well, but it seems like Samsung phones are getting first dibs on most of the fancy stuff for now. And then there are a ton of other things I've noticed, like how Microsoft To Do allows you to put a shortcut into the Quick Actions toggle. There is Dex, which now lets you turn your phone into a mini desktop inside Windows, which is wild, but I'll just stop here. Much of this is still quite buggy in my experience, but it's clear to see that the companies have gone far and beyond just preloading apps. And I would like to see more integrations in the future too. For example, I would like to see screen off notes on the Note 10 sync not only to Samsung Notes, but optionally also to Microsoft OneNote, so I could access them across devices, for example. And I would like Samsung to make foldable Windows devices too. Microsoft is rumored to be announcing their new OS that's built for foldables and pen input soon, which Lenovo has already shown a teaser device for, and I would really like Samsung to build a kick-ass foldable for that as well. Now, if you like watching TechAltar videos, I have a really good recommendation for what you should watch next. Digits is a fantastic documentary about how the internet works, hosted by fellow YouTuber Derek from Veritasium. He talks to everyone from the early inventors of the internet to Edward Snowden, explaining how the underlying technologies like network switches work, and also things like how white hat hackers save you from the bad guys. You can watch it for free on CuriosityStream if you sign up with my link in the description below, and you will also get access to thousands of professional documentaries available on the site, including shows from Stephen Hawking, David Attenborough, and Jane Goodall. CuriosityStream works on essentially every device you own, including smartphones, computers, and smart TVs, so sign up if that sounds like fun to you, and I'll see you in the next video.